Hi, and welcome to episode number 61 of Basha's Thoughts. Do you ever feel like you want to come up with solutions? You know, when a person is telling you about some problems they're having, do you get this desire to just bring out something and say, well, hey, this is how you get to solve it? Many of us experience this desire to want to solve whatever it is that is ailing another person. And why is that? Well, today I'd like to dive into one particular reason for why this may be. And this is the trauma of the schizoid structure. Alexander Lowen's Bioenergetics schizoid structure. For those who are familiar with it, it may be interesting to know that this is actually what we're talking about. And those who are not familiar with the terminology, it doesn't really matter. You're going to understand anyway what it's about. So in the schizoid structure, the reason why we actually have this almost need to help, need to solve something, is because of an underlying feeling of inadequacy. That if I cannot solve this, then I am not adequate. I am not enough. I am not enough as I am. I am not worthy. I'm not valuable if I cannot solve this other person's problems. I'm not worthy of love. I'm not worthy of being loved. In fact, I deserve to be punished. I'm a bad person. I'm not good enough. I probably don't even have the right to be here. But I'm trying to. And so I'm trying to solve problems. I'm trying to help people to prove that I actually have the right to be here, or to not allow myself to think that terrible thought that maybe I'm not worthy of love. If you notice, all of this thinking, which isn't really thinking, it's beyond thinking, because it's underneath thinking. It's before we actually think. All of this structure is based around the paradigm of judgment that we are trained to live in, where we are trained to feel guilty, feel shameful, feel that we deserve to be punished if we do not comply with whatever ideas have been put into our mind. This is the paradigm of the hierarchical structure where organization is accomplished through a hierarchy of power, which is what we have been living in for a long, long time, and which is something that is self-destructive. And we are at the end of that cycle, and so it is time for us to change if we wish to continue. In my case, I have been able to see this feeling of inadequacy come up in all sorts of places. For instance, it was interesting for me to notice that very often when I do not enjoy interactions, it is actually exactly because of this, because I feel that I am not able to help the other person through whatever it is they're going through, and I do not feel adequate. And so inside of me, based on an initial trauma, the trauma of the schizoid, I replay it and I create a dramatic situation where I make myself suffer for no reason at all, inwardly. I remember one time a friend of mine asked me to help him with something, and I spent the whole weekend trying to help him with that thing. and it was actually a paper, and I spent so much time on it, and the whole weekend had gone by, and I had only gone through some, I don't know, 40 pages of the document, and I felt that I had failed. I had not been able to go through the whole document, and the week was starting, and I didn't really have time to continue with this. And so I told the person that this is what I have done, and this is what I can do. But inwardly, I was feeling very, very bad for a long time, feeling like I was abandoning this person. And yet, the only thing the other person ever told me was how grateful he was, how happy he was, how wonderful it was that I was able to help him with all of that. And thank you. There was no judgment from his part. There was no idea of, you should continue, you should try to help me more. Nothing. And yet, inside of myself, I continued feeling bad, feeling like I had abandoned the person, because maybe I could have not slept, maybe I could have done more. When you think about it, it's really silly and funny. Why would you create so much drama inside of yourself for no reason at all? I also had another situation where a friend of mine was going through a difficult time that had nothing to do with me, but I was able to interact with him, talk to him, and I was not even really aware, but I wasn't feeling very well interacting with him. And when I looked at it, I realized, look, it's the same pattern. And so I actually decided to ask him, what can I do for you? Tell me, how can I help you in this situation? And it was so interesting to hear that he said that actually he could not think of anything else that I could do, because I had already done this and that and the other, and he could not even think of anyone else, any other person that would have done all of that for him. And so he was feeling immensely happy and grateful. And again, inside of me, I had been creating a completely different situation that had nothing to do with what was actually going on. Instead, I was replaying my old trauma of judging myself as inadequate, as not worthy, as not enough. But I was given this gift by this other person to actually just stop, look, and laugh. I can also find this pattern in situations that seem to be positive, and situations where I do not feel bad. At least I do not really notice myself judging myself. And yet, sometimes others give me the gift of showing me that I am without even knowing it. I can let go of that judgment too. An example was a friend of mine, and I was interacting with him, and it was very nice. And I was doing just ordinary things. I happened to have some special type of ice cream that I had gotten for him a day earlier, and I gave it to him. And in that moment, I could see how he honestly reacted in a way where he felt cared for, and he felt so happy. And I remember almost thinking, being really surprised, really? is this enough? But this was nothing. This was just a tiny little thing that I did for you. And this is enough? Enough to make you feel happy, satisfied? Can I be enough just by being the way I am? I wasn't even trying anything. Can I be enough just by being myself? What an odd idea for a schizoid structure. And what a beautiful gift to be given, to be able to see that indeed we are enough as we are, and we can choose to look at things that way, and then we don't have to suffer, and we can actually see things from a larger perspective and have access to greater love and kindness in our interactions. So a few episodes ago, I talked about fearlessness. And in that episode, we talked a little bit about what do you do when you have fear? Well, if you're in fear, you can try to move through that fear. So you can, for instance, try to create situations where you face that fear and you become better and better at facing it and moving through it. Or you can try to avoid situations like that. There are different things that you can try to do, but actually there's a way of learning that does not involve fear. And when you move into it, fear just happens to fall off because you no longer need it. And that way of dealing with fear is to move into a larger perspective where fear no longer is relevant and it just falls away. In that episode, we were talking about driving and how when you're starting to drive, you look right in front of the car because that's where you can hit someone, for instance. That's where you might run off the road. So the front of the car is where you tend to focus because that's where you're afraid something might happen. And indeed, if something happens, that is where it does happen. But if you focus on that, you will maintain a great level of fear. If you can look from a larger perspective, you can look up and see ahead of you, then you see what is coming, and then you're not as fearful because you have more time to react and you know better how to react. If you need to swerve, how you need to swerve, and so on. So, by finding a larger perspective, we can make the fear start to fall away. And this is relevant for most, if not all, types of fears. Whenever we have a fear, we can ask, what is the larger perspective where the fear is no longer relevant? So let's apply this to the situation of feeling that you need to solve the problems of everyone around you, and doing so because of this idea of inadequacy. If I cannot solve, I'm not enough. The fear is that you're not worthy of love, you're not worthy of being here, and maybe even that you deserve to be punished. If that is the fear of not being loved, in this particular case, what is the larger perspective that you can take so that this fear isn't even relevant to you? Well, as we mentioned before, this perspective is within the paradigm of judgment. And judgment, as opposed to just discernment, has this idea of a value judgment. So you say, well, one of these options is better than the other. One is good, the other one is bad in some sense. And I want to be on the good side for whatever reason. Thus, judgment has a clinging to it, and we cling to one particular thing, and that reduces our focus, our perspective. So, if we can release judgment, then we can move into a larger perspective, where, just like with the car, we can see more, and so we see what is coming. Releasing judgment does not mean that we release discernment. Just like looking up and being able to see what's ahead of us doesn't mean that we automatically, for instance, no longer see the front of the car. We see it, but we're not focusing on it. Instead, our focus is on seeing further ahead so that we can maintain a broader vision and be more efficient in our driving or acting or living. Releasing judgment in this particular situation brings compassion to us, compassion for ourselves, acceptance of ourselves, knowing that we are in different limited situations, and that's okay. We are okay, just the way we are. And releasing judgment does not mean that now we will become a bad person because we no longer judge. We still have discernment. We're just not going to be obsessively focused on one particular subset and clinging to it. Instead, we are going to feel compassion, and compassion is a type of love. So we're going to feel a compassionate love for ourselves, accepting ourselves as we are, and making our decisions from there. Operating from the paradigm where we release judgment, we release fear. Judgment and fear are tightly bound up, and when we can use this broader perspective, then fear will not come up as readily. Judgment is also a denial of the divine, the denial of our essence. Because when you judge, you cling to just one part, and you say only this, not everything else. Only this is good. Only this could be godly, divine. That other terrible stuff is certainly not divine. And the unifying and transcending dynamics is where you move beyond it and you see it all from a higher perspective. Like we've said before, moving up the pendulum instead of swinging between the two extremes of judgment. And moving beyond judgment is a way of moving into greater and greater freedom. Freedom from all kinds of dramas that we create and superimpose, often on situations that are not really even going on, like in the examples I created in my life that I told you about, where I superimposed my old trauma upon something that wasn't even really going on in that moment. And I was limited and suffering based on that. And there was no need. So whenever we do feel bad, whenever we feel something that does not feel like our highest excitement. Whenever we feel that somehow we are suffering, we can try to look at it and try to understand what is actually going on and why this is going on. And often we will find the fear. What is the underlying fear behind this? And once we find the fear, we can ask, what is a broader perspective of looking at this? How can I redefine this situation from a broader perspective? And then often the fear will fall away, as will the suffering. And now the idea of wanting to solve things, wanting to help people, can actually become a true desire to assist the other person and not be hidden behind a trauma that we had, not be hidden behind our own judgment of ourselves as inadequate. Instead, it can come from love. Now our help and assistance can come from love and compassion, because we also have that love and compassion for ourselves when we move beyond the paradigm of judgment and we release judgment. That was it for today. I might talk to you in another podcast episode. Take care.